Mr. Nichols, welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I've spent 40 years, the last 40 years in the private side of the timber industry here. 25 of those years have been in Alaska. The last 14 years as owner of timber companies in Alaska, buying and harvesting timber sales from landowners, including the U.S. Forest Service. The industry today is on the verge of going away due to the lack of consistent timber supply. All federal and state timber sales are being delayed with litigation and appeals by environmental groups opposed to all timber harvest. The U.S. Forest Service, the timber industries, the communities of Southeast Alaska, and even some conservation groups all say they want a timber industry. The problem is you cannot have a viable timber industry without a land base for growing and harvesting timber. Prior to 1976, 5 million acres of Tongass was managed for timber. By 1980, this was reduced to 3 million acres. The 2008 plan further reduced it to 663,000 acres, and now the new plan amendment will take it down to 251,000 acres of young growth forest. I was told by a conservation person, we do not have the timber available today because we cut it all. There are 16.8 million acres in the Tongass. Commercial grade forests make up 3.6 million acres. 420,000 acres have been previously harvested. I think my math is pretty correct that we have 3.2 million acres of old growth timber remaining in the Tongass. The plan amendment will restrict the industry to 251,000 acres of young growth and a small volume of old growth for niche markets. This is 7% of the commercial timber acres and a little over 1% of the Tongass National Forest. The Forest Service, and I think the state of Alaska, has done a very good job in protecting our tourism. We have over 1 million people a year coming to Ketchikan on cruise ships. Our salmon runs are strong, with the fishing industry doing very well. We have no endangered species on the forest. But we have a timber industry with 1 small sawmill, 4 timber harvesting companies left, and a handful of micro sawmills. Our rural communities are not doing well. From 2000 to 2014, 22 of the 32 communities in Southeast Alaska has lost population. The plan amendment will forever change the timber industry in Southeast. Once it is in place, it never gets better for the industry. Only more restrictions as time goes forward, so it cannot be undone. The plan has to work or there will be no timber industry. So to have a viable timber industry, we have to have a consistent supply of economically viable timber sales. It's pretty simple, but not when you have declining land base for growing and harvesting timber and a rugged, remote area with high cost and now only a market commodity product to sell. My issues with the U.S. Forest Service is not know how many of the 250,000 acres of young growth we can harvest economically or legally. When we look at the Tongass, we look at the fall down acres. With the 250,000 acres, we have changing regulations from when this was cut originally. We lose lands to visual constraints, additional fish streams will be found, karst on limestone islands will have to be protected, overly steep slopes cannot be cut a second time. Additional protection for wildlife. We are also going to get fall down due to the economic viability. Small isolated patches of timber, suppressed small timber stands, high elevation, high road costs, and all decreased. My fear is we'll see a significant number of acres lost to fall down, especially in the older age class stands that were harvested with very few restrictions. My fear is the timber industry cannot be feasible with this amendment, so it's best to finish the cruise, rerun the models, and see how much actual sustainable economic timber will be available. I would like to finish my testimony with the words from President Theodore Roosevelt, who signed the legislation creating the Tongass National Forest. This is what he had to say about forest policy. You can never afford to forget, for a moment, what is the object of our forest policy. That is not to preserve the forests because they are beautiful, though that is good in itself, nor because they are refuges for the wild creatures of the wilderness, though that is good in itself. But the primary objective of our forest policy, as the land policy of the United States, is the making of prosperous homes. Government legislation, rulemaking, and administration of our national forests no longer resembles what these national forests were created for and set aside for management by the government. Our land management is broken and not serving the people well. It has to be fixed by sound forest management and not politics. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Appreciate it, and appreciate you traveling a long way.